As you may recall, last year, my firebelly newt Fs passed away. Since then, I'd been pondering what to do with the space that they previously occupied. I've talked about starting an aquatic bug aquarium for a while now, so this summer, I finally began working on it. I had a spare 20-gallon long ready to be used, so I threw it up where the newt nursery used to be and began considering my options. Then, I seeded it with beneficial bacteria from the newt's old substrate. This boost of bacteria in the new system will help jumpstart the natural processes that will keep my tank healthy. I spread the old gravel out evenly and filled the tank for the first time. This is always one of my favorite parts of setting up an aquarium. Finally, before I get to the fish store for some supplies, I added a couple pieces of jungle bough, some driftwood, and a couple nutrient taps to the base layer of substrate and hit the tank with an initial water change. To top it all off, I added a top layer of sand. Before I get to really scaping this tank, I wanted to get all the elements that make it look presentable for you first. Let's go get a light and some filtration. I went back and forth on whether or not I wanted to simply use a pump for this tank, or a sponge filter, or maybe even a turtle filter, considering that it would have land and water segments. But ultimately I landed on ordering some sponge filters online while I looked at the awesome selection of creatures that they had at the store. I ended up coming home with a light. This light should work really well for the plants I want to add to this tank. I'll be sourcing some native riparian plants for this scape, as well as a few new aquatic species. Of course, I'm going to add trimmings from the 30-gallon to this tank, and I've added a single stray jungle vow, as you saw, to the tank as it cycles, but won't be staying in this tank. Now the light's all set up, and we can watch the snails begin to make trails in the surface sediment. These are ram's horn snails, sneaky travelers who made their way into the tank from the jungle bough. I've got them in all of my tanks. I think they're probably one of my favorite snails. Now it was time to really get scaping. I drained the tank of all of the cloudy water, flattened out the sediment, and began to fill it up with new water. My snail friends looked like wanderers in a vast desert during a sandstorm. They trekked over the dunes in search of algae or other detritus to feed on. We were finally ready for the rock work. I spent a lot of time washing duckweed off of some really cool rocks, and now they're ready for a new home. I wanted several areas for a little beetle to crawl out of the water and spread their legs. So I created a sort of pile of rocks over in the corner of the tank that built up a small riverbank. These flower pots are going to be worked into the tank to be filled with dry substrate and moss, as I want to add adequate spaces for the diving beetles to potentially breed. I continued to add rocks until I was satisfied with the look of the little riverbank I was trying to build up. With all of that now in place, we can add our filter and start focusing on the finer details. My sponge filters arrived in the mail, and it was finally time to set them up and start stirring up the surface of our stream side tank. If you recall, the initial stocking I had planned for this tank included aquatic isopods and diving beetles. These animals would need a little bit of land to crawl out onto, and I would need to make sure that the diving beetles wouldn't be able to fly out of the tank. In order to make sure that our glass lid stays flush on top of the tank and doesn't allow the bugs to get out, I marked pieces of the back of the lid to be cut to allow the air tubes to run through but keep the bugs inside. This Anubis from the shrimp tank was anchored to this piece of dragonstone, and I didn't want to risk killing the plant, so I decided to add the whole rock. This style of stone doesn't quite match the scene I'm going for in this tank, but that's okay. I began to like more and more how different elements were coming together, a hodgepodge playground for my little invertebrates to enjoy. I added tons of pea gravel all over the stacks of larger rocks and all over the sandy substrate around the tank just to add a little extra texture and a little extra naturalism. I like to let these rocks and gravel sort of fall into place organically. This really enhances the naturalistic look that I'm going for in this tank, and I think our snails really appreciate it. But as I finalized the scape for this tank, something began to dawn on me. Why should it be fair that I make a great haven for little aquatic invertebrates while my handful of colorful shrimp mull around in this tank, which has lost its sparkle? I've come to a decision. This tank will be dismantled, and the shrimp will be the first residents of the invertebrate tank. Let's begin by removing the filter and some of the desirable plants. I captured my 3 remaining shrimp out of the cube and began to slowly acclimate them to the new water. The parameters should be quite similar to what they're used to, but we're just being safe. And just like that, the next life forms have made their way into the tank. With these plants and some clippings from the 30-gallon in place, it's time to find the final plants for this tank, as well as tend to these pots. My goal is for these pots to sustain conditions that the diving beetles will find suitable for laying their eggs in. My private research suggests that they require varying levels of dry to wet substrate for nesting their eggs in. Hopefully, with a little MacGyvering, I can create a place to test this out. Or so I thought. Shocking development on the bug tank front. We have big changes coming to the stocking for this tank. All right, I'm back here at one of my favorite local creeks because today we are going to be catching some isopods for the tank, and we're also going to be grabbing some native plant species. So let's get in the water and let's see what we can find. And that was exactly what I did. I set out at my usual spots looking for aquatic isopods to collect, but to my surprise, I didn't find a single one. I was discouraged, and the tank's progress started to sit on the back burner. And of course, that's when the semester began, and I'd gotten too busy to prioritize discovering my desired invertebrates for the time being. However, my expeditions looking for aquatic invertebrates weren't entirely fruitless, as I did manage to find one specimen of plant that I thought would make an excellent member of the ecosystem we were creating in our tank. This is water forget-me-not, and I harvested it from a creek in my area. I don't recommend ever doing this with plants and planting them in your yard or anything like that. Water forget-me-not spreads incredibly easily, and it can be invasive in several territories. But for my purposes, this plant was going to work great. And luckily for me, I was given an opportunity to change the plans for this tank that got me significantly excited about continuing its progress once more. Meet the 11 gray tree frog tadpoles that will be calling this tank their nursery. A project outside of my own collection has made finding this species a priority, and luckily, a jar full of them was thrust into my care. After careful acclimation, watch as these tadpoles finally bring this tank truly to life. They were incredibly exciting to watch. Amphibians are my favorite animals on Earth, and their metamorphosis has captured my awe for longer than I can remember. Quickly, some of these little guys had already developed back legs. In only a short time, they will be using the leaves, pots, and wood to make their fledgling journey out of the water. But for now, these guys are going to get acquainted with the peaceful bottom feeders of this tank, and spend their time munching on the algae and scum that accumulates on the sand and surface of the water alike. After only a few weeks, it happened. A baby froglet had made its way out of the water for the first time. One by one, these tadpoles started to complete their life cycle and transform into their adult shape. Gray tree frogs are one of the most temperate species of tree frog in America, and they're known for their spectacular camouflage. This species can blend in very well with tree bark and lichen, making them very hard to find in the wild. As you can see here, these adolescents are blending in bright green with the vegetation all around where they emerge from the water. Here's an adult gray tree frog I met this summer for reference. With young frogs emerging from the water now, this meant it was already time to put together yet another amphibious nursery. I used my 5-gallon to set up a small enclosure that I could monitor the health of the frogs with. Paper towel substrate that I change every week or two allows me to see if the frogs are really eating. Sphagnum moss will hold some moisture, as will a little water basin. And every night, I dust the tank with a handful of flightless fruit flies for the little guys to start using to hone their ferocious froggy instincts. All in all, I ended up with 4 adolescent tree frogs. This may seem like a loss, and I wish more of the tadpoles would have made it, but this is entirely natural for frog spawn. Amphibians often lay hundreds, even thousands of eggs in a body of water so that a small percentage will be ensured to make it out of the water again, while most of the tadpoles die of natural causes or by predation. These guys are a few months old at this point, and they're ready to move on from such a basic enclosure. In due time, I will scape a vertical terrarium for 1 to 2 of them to keep growing up nice and strong. What about the others, you might be asking? Well, don't worry, I'm raising them for a good cause. The Herp Club is working on a massive 4 by 3 by 2 foot native amphibian bioactive terrarium, and I can't wait to tell you more about that. Some of these frogs are going to spend the rest of their lives in that incredible tank. For now, I'll just keep taking care of these little frogs until I get the funds to give them their next upgrade. As for the bug tank, it still stands, just housing the shrimp and snails, and I think it may stay that way for the foreseeable future. I'll be moving in several months, and I'd like to transport as few tanks as possible out of my house. With that being said, I'm so glad I finally got to show you my new friends, and I'm so grateful to watch my young amphibians flourish after my newt failure. Thank you all for watching. I've been the Collegiate Creature Keeper, and please stay tuned for the Collegiate Creature Keeper 100 subscriber special, and I will catch you later.